This is it. This is it. COP29 has finished and a deal has been achieved. We have a new climate finance deal that has been achieved in Baku, Azerbaijan. And you're probably going to be wondering, is it a good deal? Is it a bad deal? What do experts think? What does Tony think? I want to just catch up with you today. So in this session, and just tell you what is my opinion, what is that I think about what has just been achieved. So stay tuned. We're going to unpack that. See you soon. Hello, and welcome to Renewables in Africa. I'm always delighted to see you here, right? To Sunday Talk with Tony. So, who am I? I'm Tony Chi, I'm the founder of Shell Renewables in Africa. What we do, very simple. We raise awareness about renewables energy in Africa, but also across the globe. If you happen to be a project developer, an EPC company, or an investor, or a supplier, and say, hey, I want to tap into the market in the continent of Africa, you are at the right door, right? So I definitely want to support. I want to say congratulations first. And I'm sure you have two key issues you like to talk about, right? Number one, how can I reduce my business development cost? And number two, so how can I fast track access to customer? Because the faster I can respond to those two questions, the faster as well I can achieve success in my enterprise in Africa, in my expansion, right? So let me help you because we have developed awareness packages for you. I believe will be just suitable, right? What it gives you, three things. The first thing is it gives you the visibility that you need. But to who? To general public, that's fine. But more specifically to your target audience, who are they? These are the people that buy your product, your service, will participate in your program. We're going to help you to connect with them. So once you connect with them, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get qualified leads. When you get those qualified leads, guess what you're going to get? Sales. As simple as that. So I like to take 15 minutes of my time and your time just to show you how we can make it work for you, demonstrate what we've done for other people, and give you the confidence that yes, it would work. As simple as that. So book some time with me and let's talk about that. So I just want to come back to the topic of today, COP29. As you see, just wrap up in Baku, Azerbaijan. And as usual, the talk always run into the early hours, because it's always overrun because it's not that easy to get a deal. We're scrambling towards at the end. And for this particular one, obviously there was a big tension, and some nation, a small island nation, they even walk away at some point. So the talk were on the verge of collapse. And guess what? Like it happened in many other years, they finally managed to achieve a deal. What is the deal about? First of all, what is important for you? First, it is important for you because guess what? So this is where you have global policies who are actually decided, a policy that will affect you, whether you're a government, whether you are a business, whether you are an individual. So it's important to pay attention to what's happening there. And guess what? This is to tackle a challenge, a problem that we all face, which is the problem of climate change. How do we adjust to that? How do we actually fight that? And how can we make sure that we can come on top of this challenge? That's what it's all about. So COP29 is very important for that. And it's great because more and more people are actually realizing what's happening and obviously they should go there. Now, it's important also to understand the deal that has been agreed. Like I said, this is not a game, by the way, right? So this is something very, very serious. It's important to always remind ourselves of that. So what has been achieved, and is it good or a bad deal? So what has been achieved, first of all, is important to understand what was actually being asked. So this specific COP was really particular regarding the climate finance deal. Why? Because back in 2009, so there was the target that was achieved, which was actually saying that the developed nation was going to spend $100 billion, right? So that was obviously 2009, first of all, when we had the Kyoto Protocol, and then 2015 was reinforced by the Paris Agreement. The richer nation, the developed nation, was going to contribute $100 billion every year to support the developing nation to get up to speed, right? With adaptation, mitigation, resilience, right? When we talk about the climate change. And this rule, obviously, that was adopted is actually expiring next year, 2025. And guess what? Usually the COP before, there are discussion to look at, okay, what should be the new target. So that was one of the, if not the main thing for this year. So what has happened then? There has been a deal, absolutely. But let me talk to you about the deal just after I show you the intervention I have for France 24. You haven't seen that yet. I'm just going to play that right now so we see what it is. And after that, we can reconvene, and I can tell you a little bit more about the deal that has been agreed and give you my opinion. Is that okay? Excellent. Just stay tuned.
And let's listen. Mohamed Adao, he's the director of Power Shift Africa, and he said this is the worst COP in recent memory, and for him, the draft proposal is unacceptable.
Our expectation was low, but this is a slap in the face. This is not something any developing country will fall for. We needed an ambitious climate finance goal that meets the needs of the developing country, and what they're offering us is a fifth of what developing countries have asked for. Will we settle for a fifth of the ambition that developing countries can provide? Of course not. And so there's no way this is going to be accepted by anyone.
And for more on this, we have with us Tony Tiyu from the Renewable Energy Specialist. He's the founder and CEO of Renewables in Africa. So Tony, you heard the director saying that the draft is a slap in the face. Your reaction?
Well, I think I would agree with him, right? Because this COP, it was meant to be the COP for finance and highlight the urgent need to transform global climate finance. You have vulnerable nations that were pushing for a new collective target, from the 100 billion that was actually running out by 2025 to 1.3 trillion, to address mitigation, adaptation, loss and damages. And what they're offering the developed nation is 250, which is just 1/5 of what is considered. Clearly, you can understand why people would consider that clearly unacceptable.
So countries vulnerable to climate change are asking $1.3 trillion per year. So how did we come up with this figure? I mean, what is, as far as African countries are concerned, what's for them?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I can say that is actually worked out by people much more clever than me, so economists. And it's a complicated approach that would take into account scientific modeling, economic analysis, and also principle of climate justice. So we look at, for example, items like impact assessment. You want to quantify the economic losses from climate change in developing nations. You want to estimate the cost of extreme weather events, agricultural disruption, and infrastructure damages. And there's many other things that obviously come into that. You will look at, for example, also the adaptation cost calculation, where you want to determine the investment needed to make those critical systems resilient, and how can we move those economy from a fossil fuel base to clean energy base, and also what is the level of historical responsibility. You package all of that to come up with a 1.3 trillion. So that's what I could say regarding that figure.
So the negotiations are still ongoing in Baku. Do you know about the latest? What have you been hearing?
Oh, I think I could, like you could see in your previous report. So at the moment, there's no deal, right? So we need to have further conversations to move to hopefully a consensus. So I'm hearing that the new text could be talking about a higher amount than $250 billion per year, but recognizing what is actually needed is 1.3 trillion. And I know as well that developed nations, what they would like to see is to have a much bigger contributor base. They don't want to have the same few paying for that amount, which is obviously debatable, but they want to obviously invite people like China and India to make voluntary participation, which those countries at the moment say strictly no.
So the first COP was almost 30 years ago. Since then, there's one everywhere. We all remember the Paris Agreement that covered, you mentioned, climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and finance. So many COPs, are they still relevant?
That's an excellent question. That actually reminds me that I published an article like that on LinkedIn recently, and a friend of mine reacted to that and say, what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for COP 100? Why can't we solve the problem right now? But I would still argue that COP remain essential, right, for Africa to unify its voice and advocate for equitable climate solution. In fact, at COP, this is where you have global policy that are shaped, and Africa participation is needed to ensure that the needs are considered. But what we really need for those COP, and I think I would agree with everybody there, the sentiment is that we need to be obviously translating those discussions into tangible outcome. So the focus must shift to accountability and implementation to ensure that the conferences really deliver results for vulnerable nations, because they are the ones suffering.
Thank you, Tony Tiyu, CEO of Renewables in Africa. Thank you very much for analysis.
Okay, so you have seen my intervention of France 24, and I must admit, actually, it's I've not moved away from that. Obviously, that was just yesterday, that on Friday that I had a conversation. So now, since then, what has happened? We have had a deal. Obviously the early hours of of Sunday. So we've had a deal, 11th hour, I will usually say. And what is the deal saying? So the amount that is actually put forward, it's slightly higher than 250 billion that was actually offered by the developed nation. Now we're not talking about 300 billion, right? We're not talking about 300 billion. We're also saying that, as I was saying, obviously in the interview. So the developed nation will take the lead to provide this amount every year, and also that means as well that other countries are invited to do so. So countries like, for example, Saudi Arabia, China, potentially India, they could also invite it to make some contribution, but this is not on the this is purely on a voluntary basis. The bulk of it is actually by the developed nation. This is where it's compulsory. But what he's also saying is this amount actually can be provided not only by public finances or public investment, but also private investment. So it leaves the door to a lot of other sources that could participate into that. Now, most likely in this amount, I think I've not seen the final text myself, but that's actually what I've seen here. And they're probably going to come back and sort of have another catch up, just so I can give you a little more detail if needed. But what I've seen is actually here. So why the developing nation were asking for purely grant and just concessionary finance. So the final text definitely includes the private sector. That means as well we're talking about loans here, and obviously, hopefully, those loans would be at, let's say, preferential rate or preferential terms to make sure that it doesn't just add up to the debt burden that those developing countries have already. So this is actually what we have, and obviously, you have a lot more other small other deals that have been agreed there. So you need to look at a smaller print to see whether it's really good or not. So now, what is the sentiment of people, right? So there is a deal. So that means that the majority of the nation present so at the conference have adopted that, otherwise it would not have been passed. But as with the margin, it's still far from actually making the consensus, the general consensus or the general approval from everybody, right? So this is where we hear. So some nations clearly are not happy, right? So smaller island nations, they won't be happy, and yeah, and so on and so forth, right? So clearly, it's not enough. It's a start. Some have said. Now, the question you probably going to be asking yourself. So, Tony, what do you think? What do the experts say? Okay, you will read what experts say, right? Just leave it to you. Just Google it. I'm sure it's going to be everywhere in the internet, right? You'll see what these people are saying here and there. But let me give you my honest take on it, right? Because the question is very clear for me. Is it a good deal? Is it a bad deal? So that is the question. So what do you think? What do you think is the answer? Is it good? Is it not good? I guess it depends what side of the equation you're siding on, right? You will say it is good. Others will say it's good if you actually happen to be most likely from a developed nation, and it's not good if you develop a nation. So it depends, right? So that's what I'm assuming. But here's what I think. So I think it at the same time a good deal and a bad deal. Yes. But first of all, it is a deal. That's what I want to say. First of all, it is a deal because it wasn't given, right? So we shouldn't take it for granted. We're almost very close not having a deal at all this year, and maybe report it, push it to next year, which is obviously COP30. There's going to be COP30, by the way. Yeah. So we've not obviously at the end of the conversation here, right? So first of all, the one thing that I want to say before I give you detail my take on it is I was discussing with some friend of mine and those people as well that reacted to the interviews that I did with Tran 24, right? And one thing I wanted to say is actually is we become so accustomed to the COP events every year, end of the year, that we sometimes almost forget that this is not, as I'll say, a joke, right? This is not something, an event that we should just pass on from country to country. So we clearly should be going there with the intention of really solving the problem and fixing it once for all. It's almost as if when we go to COP every year, we should be thinking this is going to be the last COP because we're going to be fixing things right now, or at least giving ourselves a proper deadline by which you say after that, that's it. It's been done and dusted. We've solved it. There's no more COP after. So we need to be in that thinking. Otherwise, I know we're talking about COP. It's not football here. So it's not soccer or football here. So it's not COP like just going to move from one country to the other, celebrate, bring the whole nation. No, that's not the Olympics. Don't confuse that with that. COP here, conflict of the party. We're here to solve, for me, a very important problem. Yeah. So that's why it's important to have this mindset. That's what I'm saying. We need to be going there thinking this is going to be the last COP. This is where we have to put all our effort to make sure the problem is solved. Now, let's coming back to my take on it. I believe that, first of all, it is a deal, and we need to, let's say, applaud that, the fact that we at least have a deal. It's an imperfect deal, but it's a deal, right? So is it good or bad? I've given it to you already. So it's at the same time, so a good deal, but a bad deal. But let me detail that, right? So why is it a bad deal? First, let me start by that. It's a bad deal because clearly this is very, very short of what was needed. So what was needed was 1.3 trillion. That was actually worked out, as I say, people much more clever than I that worked out, hey, that's what we need every year. And I know when I actually mentioned that, and I know that because I've had some conversations, it sounds a lot of money, right? But guess what? We spend much more than that during COVID. Absolutely. Yeah. And also we're spending a lot more than that when you're looking at some subsidies that are going to fossil fuel. That's what you need to understand. That's what I'm saying. It depends what you compare it against. Yes. See, 1.3 trillion just for one country, that is a lot of money. We think, yeah, that's it. But bear in mind, the developing nation, when they're asking for that, yeah, don't forget that this is 1.3 trillion that is actually going to basically to cater for the need of 6.7, at least 6.7 billion people. That's actually the population from the developing nation. Yeah, that's what you need to bear in mind. And these are the guys who struggle the most. And these are the guys we want them to adapt, we want them to mitigate, we want them to construct, to build resilient economies. That's what it takes, right? So that's why I need people to remember that. So if you compare that to what is really needed and it was actually quantified by experts, it's definitely far from enough, right? So just 1/5 of what is actually needed, and that is actually not great. So that means already that you could see people are going to continue to struggle and to suffer. Yeah, so that's what I say. So on that, definitely is a bad deal, and we're always kicking the can further. Yeah, because this has been agreed. That's 300 billion. Also, I must say that's 300 billion. That's the new climate finance deal that is actually going to be running all the way to 2025. That means 11 years later. That's what we're talking about here. That's when we actually will have to assess and maybe talk about a new deal. And by then, if we've not produced the effort that is needed, we're going to be needed even more. So basically every year, it costs more and more money to fix the problem because we're actually kicking the can later down the line. This is actually what we need to think about. And that's what I'm saying. For that, clearly, I don't think it's a good deal. I think it's a bad deal. Yeah, if we take that into consideration. And also we're saying that, okay, that's fine, that there's some leverage here to extend. That's also what the text is saying, to extend that to 1.3 trillion by using other mechanisms. That's fine. But you know how it is, right? If it's not properly defined, it's not going to go. But it's almost like the Paris Agreement was saying, first of all, we need to focus on the 2 degrees Celsius, make sure that the global temperature doesn't increase up to 2 degrees Celsius. And then we move into 1.5 degree. And we say 2 degrees Celsius with the view to obviously aim for 1.5 degree actually. Yeah, that's what we're saying. So I'm saying, so that was sort of double target there. And guess what? People are going to go for the easiest target. Even the easiest target, we're not even achieving that. So that's what I want to say. So when there was a little bit of, let's say, I wouldn't say confusion, but let's say no clarity on the real target, nobody's going to look at the 1.3 trillion, right? So we're going to look at the 200 billion. That's clearly what was going to happen here. So we open the door for private sector to come in. That's fine. That's okay. But if it's not properly regulated, guess what? We struggle to get there. Yeah. So for me, that's looking at that, clearly it's a bad deal, right? And we can't say that it was great. Now, I also think, nevertheless, that is a good deal. Probably going to say, Tony, how could you say that? You just say it was a bad deal. How can all of a sudden you're thinking about it's of this deal being a good deal? But let me explain myself. Give me a chance to explain myself before you can actually decide whether or not I'm making sense, right? Oh, by the way, as I'm saying that, don't forget, I'd like you to like, to comment, and to subscribe to our channel. Please do that for me and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, because what we're doing in this video, I want to make sure that we give you the right insight, the right information. But it's key to have your feedback. It's key to have your engagement so that I know whether or not we are actually serving you, because that's my purpose here. It's really to serve you, right? So I was saying that I think it's also a good deal. So why am I saying that? First of all, as I said, don't remember, it's a deal, because we were very close to have no deal. So very close to no deal, I mean, we actually wait for actually next year, sort of kick the can even further. And every year we actually passing, we're making the problem worse. So first of all, it's a deal. We also need to celebrate that. First of all, yeah, it's clearly not enough, like people have said, but it is a start. Another reason why I believe also it's a deal is because guess what? So what the target, the climate finance deal that was achieved before, right? That was $100 billion. You'd be surprised to know that, and that was actually since 2009, the Kyoto Protocol, and obviously the Paris Agreement just reinforced that. But you'd be surprised to know that all the time it was $100 billion annually. It's never been consistently met, right? No, actually, the contribution were falling short of that. I think by the year 2020, we were talking about, if we look at what was actually achieved, was about $80 billion. I think in 2022, that's where it topped, slightly higher than $100 billion. But consistently, if you look at the average for the last 10 years, we've not even achieved that at all. No. But all of a sudden, what we have done, we actually tripled this target. Yeah, triple this target. What does that mean? It means that now, so obviously being a businessman and an entrepreneur, I know what it is. When you actually raise the bar, guess what? Now we're looking at a higher target. Because we can higher target, we have a chance now to actually top the $100 billion and most likely to achieve something closer to the 300 billion, right? And especially because we're saying that now actually 300 billion, but actually we want to aim out to go even 1.3. We get a, let's say, slightly better chance now to take it even further. That means even when we achieve 200 billion, that's already double what we were getting before. You see what I'm saying? So it can already make a real difference on the ground. That's what I'm saying. A real difference on the ground. So that's why I say, from that perspective, yeah, we've just tripled the target. Clearly, for me, that's the step in the right direction. From a practical point of view. So I think that's how we should be doing. So all the way, basically, all of a sudden, we've obviously tripled the target. Give a chance to go there. And on top of that, what I would add and say, we've also added some, let's say, possibility to potentially take it further by saying that it shouldn't just be private investment, right? Or public money, public investment, right? But private sector is invited as well. We have to contribute. And me personally, I actually think that this money, so what we should be doing is creating a proper environment or proper incentive to get a lot more private sector involved, because I personally believe I really don't see countries providing consistently 1.3 trillion actually here. I think we need to enable markets, to create a market that is able to obviously come and provide us this solution. In fact, I don't think we're going to get it. And I think as well, private sector is probably the way to go. But the reason I'm also thinking that this also, it's a good deal, because there was one particular good deal. And I want to end on this note just for you to know. And what I'm talking about here, this year, we clearly now have agreed, a general rule for global carbon market. And this, for me, it's a revolution because it's 9 years in the making. So just for a short reminder of people, carbon credit, they are generated by activity that reduce or will avoid planet-hitting greenhouse gas emission. Things like, for example, planting trees, or what could I say, protecting carbon sink, or replacing polluting coal with clean energy alternative. And what was quite interesting is up until now, this credit, they were mainly traded by companies on an unregulated market. And that market was dogged by scandal at times, right? I'm sure you would have heard about some of them. But, since the 2015 Paris Agreement, the climate deal envisaged that countries as well could also take part in the cross-border trade carbon reductions. Yeah. So, and the broad idea is that country, mainly the wealthy polluters, right? They can buy carbon credit from other nations that are doing better, on their own emission and cutting targets. Yeah, and actually there is a specific article on that on the Paris Climate Agreement. It's actually Article 6, right? That's known as Article 6, and include both direct country to country trading and a separate, UN backed marketplace. Yeah. And this idea has been proven quite popular for both developing nations looking for international financing. And guess what? Wealthier nation that find new ways to meet their steep emission reduction target that they have. And the European Union and the United States, they were pushing for an agreement at COP29 in Baku, obviously, right? And many developing nations, particularly in Africa and Asia, have also signed up for a project. And this has finally been agreed. And that, for me, it's a big win, right? And as you know, so at Renewables in Africa, we are more and more bullish and active on the carbon market. And that's why we want to push, because we believe strongly into this mechanism to sort of bring the new investment, obviously drive market to support further reduction and further avoidance and also CO2 emission. That, for me, it's a big win. And only even just for that, I would say, yes, this was a good deal. Because when we can get some concrete element that we can transit to the market, because it's already operational, I think it's great. So that's what I want to say. So yes, it wasn't a bad deal. It wasn't a good deal. It's a deal isn't perfect, but guess what? It's a bad deal with some very good element into it, which is a carbon market. I leave you into that. So let me know what you think. So that's my opinion on that. So yes, so let's see what next year going to bring to us. More important, whatever has been achieved, please let's work together to now implement it. Move those discussions now into the line where we're going to properly implement it on the ground, on the field, and make a change for people that are really expecting us to do it. Those vulnerable people. Guys, pleasure to see you as usual, and have a fantastic day. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.